No problem.
The gang of the eye patches.
Yes. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Smudcast number 725. How Shrek kneecapped American animation. And I'm trying to remember, was it in 2000 or 2001 Shrek came out? I can't remember. But
2001.
It was a huge hit. Everyone loved it. And I never thought of the impact in terms of, like, you know, how Jurassic Park changed how we look at animation back in the 90s. Did Shrek change how we looked at animation from DreamWorks? I don't remember.
I think it was a big hit, as in like parodies, like because I believe that like DreamWorks was created around the fact that like they had like such a distaste towards Disney, because it was ex-Disney employees that made the studio, if I'm correct.
Oh, okay, because I do know that Pixar has left its mark. It still is. It's still making video. And
absolutely, and they bought up DreamWorks.
Yeah, and so. that's what I mean. Like, I could point out to like The Incredibles 1 and 2 and how they made the change from texture maps to actual clothing. Like that was the big thing. They in the second film they actually made an animated clothing, as opposed to how it was like, what's her name? Elastic Girl was like her. You could obviously she was flexible, but you actually saw the clothing flex and move and change in the second film. They also did, what was the dinosaur? The Good Dinosaur film, which came out in 2015, I think. That was like all these water effects, all this dust and sand, and all these like a lot of effort was put into that. And the rendering time took even in 2015, the rendering time took a while just to get all those scenes to render. So when I think of like Jurassic Park, like we had SGI workstations back in the 90s. Those were top of the line at the time. That would take months, if not years, to render a certain scene, which is crazy considering when they started making the thing. And they had to figure out how to slow that down or to speed it up to do different techniques. So we had months just on the textures, just on the clothing and fabric, which was fully rendered in The Incredibles 2. And we had at least a month on some of the effects for The Good Dinosaur. And then there was what was the one with the Italian island, Luca. Luca had a bunch of effects with how he transforms, his friends transform with the water effects. So we've come a long way. I don't think it's revolutionary. Obviously, I don't know it well enough what the techniques were, but I'm assuming lots of bump mapping, lots of lighting effects that they haven't used before. And new shaders, because that's what we get, guys. If you guys don't know anything about hardware or software tech in the past, I don't know, 19 years at least, it's mostly just rendering and shading techniques from new hardware. The software has not changed. We've had ray tracing since the 90s. We just didn't have the hardware to support it. Now we do, but it's not really used that much in games because the hardware is not there yet to support the games to use it. And no one can afford it, so it's like, just wait another 2 years and we start going to get AI chips on our GPUs, and that'll change things. I don't know how, but that's a whole world I'm unfamiliar with. But yeah, the impact of Shrek, I don't know. I really don't. And it's the same with the impact with Frozen. They were blockbuster hits, but in terms of technical elements, I don't know. So hopefully, Mr. Cardinal West, who made this video in January of this year, will tell us how Shrek kneecapped or hurt American animation studios, which I'm assuming is DreamWorks and Pixar and what have you.
What I'm assuming is that he's just going to talk about how it's streamlined process of creating these animated movies, but let's see what he has to say.
All right, let's get going. Oh, he's showcasing his novel. It's Mike Myers.
Hi, how are you?
Okay. So the success, that's interesting. Okay, maybe the financial element, you could argue, of one project takes over other project. That's a possibility. I didn't think of that. Okay.
Animation in America has an image problem. While animation as a medium provides nearly unlimited freedom with regards to what can be portrayed on screen, it is widely viewed by general audiences, at least in the West, as a genre. And with that assumption comes expectations about what exactly animation should and shouldn't be.
That's an interesting statement. I don't think it's a genre, because when you think of 3D animation, I think of Korean studios, Chinese, Japanese, and it's for kids shows, not specifically Disney shows or Pixar shows. So it's pretty vast, and you'll know the feeling and the vibe of a kids show for Korean kids or Japanese kids, which is 3D, compared to American. So I wouldn't even call it a genre, maybe a cultural thing. Cultural 3D for America.
Much more of a cultural thing, yeah.
Everyone uses CGI, so I don't know how that's a genre exactly.
I guess like a lot of people still think that animation as it is for children and children alone, but that's like a misconception from a long time ago.
Oh yeah, we've had, I wouldn't say clearly adult animation, but like Cool World and Heavy Metal and all these other 80s.
Bashki's stuff is just like definitely not for children.
Right, it's just not as mainstream and popular because there's not enough people to watch it, but it's
too niche.
Yeah, it's very specific. So I want to know what this genre is for kids 3D CGI. I don't know.
Maybe that's why like anime has ruled so much, because like it's in between these. Like people can definitely say that like it's not for kids, but at the same time it's just has so many things that can off-put most Westerners that they just regard as its own genre. But that's a whole different topic on its own.
Yeah.
To understand what exactly it was that Shrek did, we first need to understand the history of the medium.
Gotta get back to the past.
The American public's general perception of animation can be traced, in part, back to the long-held and rarely challenged theatrical dominance of Walt Disney Animation Studios, as well as the situation from which they emerged in the early 20th century. While numerous techniques for creating the illusion of motion with drawings had existed long before the advent of cinema in the late 1800s, film animation did not develop until the first decade of the 20th century. These animated cartoons quickly became popular, though it was not until Walt Disney's 1928 short film Steamboat Willie, which synced animation to sound, that the so-called Golden Age of animation began. Lasting until the 1960s, the Golden Age saw Disney's shorts appearing alongside those of its competitors, namely Warner Brothers, MGM, Paramount, and Universal. These animated shorts were shown in theaters, as the television would not become widely available in ordinary households until the 1950s. During this period, Walt Disney Studios also branched out into feature-length animation, stunning the world with the release of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1937, which to this day remains the highest-grossing animated film of all time when adjusting for inflation. Now, at this time, animation was not perceived as a children's medium.
I mean, I have read like one of the letters by Tolkien and C.S. Lewis that they were shitting on Snow White, that it's so shitting on the source material itself, that it's an insult to the authors.
Oh, really?
Yes.
The adaptation was so bad.
At that time, in the 30s or 40s, was it when it was released? I think it was late 30s when Snow White was released by Disney. Is that like it was normal for adults to just go to the cinema to watch this?
Right. I don't remember the huntsman in the original Snow White, unless I remember it wrong, because there's the three elements or the three times they try to kill Snow White.
Yes.
And the first one was the huntsman, and they made a whole movie about that, and I thought, oh, that must be a spin-off of Snow White. But no, that was actually in the original telling of Snow White, the huntsman story. I think, who's the actor for that? I remember, he's the guy who plays Thor, isn't he?
I don't know.
I think it must be one of the brothers then, the guy who plays Thor. So I think they massaged it for audiences, because at the end of Snow White in the book, the evil empress or queen ends up having to wear hot shoes, like burning hot shoes. So she's tortured like that. It's like, holy shit, this is crazy. So yeah, they didn't do that for Disney. So I don't know exactly what Tolkien was saying in regards to what the adaptation being a bad one, but obviously they had to change a lot for kids. So
highly comic, absurdist, and slapstick-heavy nature would leave a mark on the psyche of the American public. As the television became commonplace in American homes throughout the 1950s, and animated cartoons became available in many American households, the desire to go see animated shorts in theaters dwindled. Taking advantage of this, Walt Disney Studios shifted its focus to producing feature-length theatrical animated films, quickly establishing itself as the dominant force in the market, while the other studios would primarily produce television cartoons, most of which were aimed at younger audiences. Disney would enjoy nearly 4 decades of virtual monopoly over theatrical American animation, lasting from the late 30s until the early to mid-80s. This extended period of massive influence over American popular culture would ingrain the idea of what theatrical animation was meant to be in the minds of audiences at large: relatively friendly, reasonably safe, and, most importantly, appropriate for children. While many Disney films would touch on darker subject matter, they studiously maintained the family-friendly image of their brand, and during this time period, the Disney brand effectively was American animation, at least in terms of feature-length films. While animated media in countries like Japan had grown to encompass a wide variety of styles, subject matter, and ratings, America saw quite the opposite occur. Now, don't get me wrong, many of Disney's works from this time period are good, and some are even great. But the problem is that this monopoly led to a lack of variety. As the animation process required specialized personnel and equipment...
Okay, that's just saying that Disney found a niche for kids or for families viewing movies, and everyone likes that. It doesn't mean...
And now they have manipulated the market to be only directed towards that.
I guess, but it doesn't mean that you couldn't make anything else. You couldn't do your own studio. You would just have to find the market for that. And maybe they've found it elsewhere. Maybe those movies or videos didn't have a proper marketing, as we saw with Cool World and what have you. So, I don't know. That it's possible. I wouldn't say it's psychologically changes. Oh, we're going to watch an adult animation now. Or like who does not want another Roger Rabbit that is actually good? Because every time we get a live action cartoon connection, they suck for whatever reason. So
they never put in the work.
Yeah, the effort in Roger Rabbit was crazy. Like some scenes took like months to shoot just to get the right effect. So if they could do it, then yeah, of course I'd watch it. But I haven't seen any good ones to worth checking out, unless you guys can recommend some. I don't know.
Difficult and expensive for newcomers to break into. While Ralph Bakshi made flawed but admirable attempts to prove to American audiences that animation could exist beyond the Disney mold, and Martin Rosen's masterful adaptations of 2 of Richard Adams' novels saw critical success, as far as the general public was concerned, animation remained something intended for kids, and hardly a field in which to push any kind of boundaries. Enter Don Bluth. Having been inspired by Disney's earliest classics, Bluth briefly worked for the studio in the mid-50s, before returning full-time in 1971, working his way up the animation hierarchy only to become disappointed with the direction the company was heading in. The flashpoint came when working on the adaptation of The Fox and the Hound. Bluth and several others felt that the character of Chief needed to die to properly generate tension between Todd and Copper, while director Art Stevens believed that it was too off-brand for a Disney movie to feature the death of a main non-villain character. This, combined with other disagreements that occurred over the course of the film's tortured production, would lead Bluth and several like-minded animators to defect from Disney and form their own studio in 1979. After producing an animated short to secure investors, they set about animating their studio's feature-length debut, an adaptation of Robert C. O'Brien's novel Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim, which had already been passed over by Disney for being too dark. The Secret of Nim...
Oh, I thought that was a Disney one. Cool.
Nim premiered in 1982 to critical praise and modest commercial success. The movie's dark subject matter, portrayals of violence and death, exquisite animation, and lack of the then ubiquitous musical numbers made it stand out markedly against its contemporaries, drawing the attention of Steven Spielberg, who would support Bluth in his next animated endeavor, An American Tail. Grossing more than $100 million on a minuscule budget, An American Tail challenged the long-held notion that Disney reigned supreme over the landscape of American animation. And while Disney itself had begun to branch out in its theatrical offerings, giving audiences two darker, non-musical features in The Black Cauldron and The Great Mouse Detective, both had failed to win significant box office success, with the former actually jeopardizing the financial status of the entire studio. But it was not until 1988 that Disney and their upstart competitors truly went head-to-head at the box office, with the dueling releases of Oliver and Company and The Land Before Time. And though Disney's film would end up grossing more money in the long run, Bluth's entry earned nearly twice as much revenue in its opening weekend, and went on to have much greater cultural staying power. In response,
The same cannot be said for the sequels, of which there are way too many, and that nobody should watch.
Yeah, those were.
There aren't any sequels. Same goes for Highlander. I don't know like what the fuck they're on about, but like they don't exist. Okay?
And Dragonheart.
Well, they were.
Oh god.
They were made to VHS, I believe, so no one really cares.
They were made to give Patrick Stewart money.
Oh, he was. Oh god, yeah, that's right.
He voiced the dragon.
Yeah, I remember. Now, why did I remember that? It's like, no.
But yeah, the first Land Before Time movie is something everyone should have on the shelf and eventually expose your children to.
Yeah, I mean, these are still shows for kids, but they're like The Secret of Nim was cool. That was just a cool movie.
Yeah. But eventually, you have to kids have to get the tougher topics, like the first and only Never-Ending Story movie. That as well, that has some dark moments, and it's important for kids to go through to learn about loss properly. The same with Majora's Mask, that was initially rated for a video game. That was initially rated for 6 years and up. The re-release was then 12 years and up, which is still fine, I'd say. Because it's all about death and the end of the world, and everybody's grieving in different stages, and it's just horrible. It's absolutely horrible. But it's wonderful as a kid, and if you look back, so either it helps you cope, or it prepares you for coping with that, or later on you remember, oh, that's what that game was about. Oh, I thought I was just having an adventure.
this challenge to their animation hegemony, Disney did exactly what they should have done. They innovated, bringing in new voices, ideas, and influences, expanding the boundaries of what exactly brand-friendly meant amidst a changing landscape. The result was what is now known as the Disney Renaissance, the critically acclaimed and commercially successful run of 10 films released between 1989 and 1999, beginning with The Little Mermaid and ending with Tarzan. And while many of these films can still be considered relatively on-brand, being musicals based on fairy tales or literary classics, the studio certainly expanded their reach, drawing on stories from around the world, and refusing to shy from including darker subject matter that only 2 decades before would have been nearly unthinkable.
Ironic.
In the meantime, Don Bluth's production company had unfortunately floundered, almost as if their desire to see the horizons of Western animation expand had been fulfilled at the cost of the quality of their own films. While 1989's All Dogs Go to Heaven still holds a lot of charm, and continued to push boundaries with its portrayals of hell, violence, murder, and drug use, subsequent entries into their filmography failed to live up to the level of their prior work. Bluth's only big hit post All Dogs, 1997's Anastasia, was essentially a Disney movie in all but name, a mythologized, musical account of a European princess story.
That thing ran surprisingly well over here.
Yeah, I actually remember that one. It was pretty good.
Same.
On to produce one more theatrically released animated film, 2000's Titan AE. And while the film did follow in the Bluth tradition of boundary pushing, giving us a gritty, action-oriented science fiction story, it unfortunately bombed at the box office. But while Bluth himself may not have seen much success post-1989, his influence had spread far beyond his former competitors at Disney, leading to a renaissance of competition across the breadth of Western theatrical animation. Pixar's mid-decade debut, Toy Story, would lead to a string of beloved and widely successful fully CGI films, while Warner Bros. Feature Animation and Fox Animation Studios would also join the fray. Meanwhile, Bluth's...
Okay, you know what? I'm not offended by this history lesson, but we're almost half done, the video. And
he's doing the thing that Red did with dragons, but he does it well, but it's still that.
I mean, we just got to Pixar, and it's like, okay, do we start now? Do we just skip ahead? Like, where's
it's rather unnecessary to like elaborate this much and you just elongate the entire video.
I'm gonna skip like a minute ahead just to see.
I can see how he wants to set this up in order to explain what was actually Kneecapped.
Okay, so here's DreamWorks. Here we go.
Their first film, 1998's Ants, allegedly involved a lot of corporate espionage, with Katzenberg, again allegedly, taking advantage of industry connections to learn about Pixar's upcoming bug-centric story, A Bug's Life, then simply titled Bugs. But while Ants and A Bug's Life did end up sharing many basic story elements, with each following a misfit ant who pines after the princess of his colony, saves his society from a threat, and is recognized as a hero, the two films took fairly different approaches. Where A Bug's Life is more traditional in its presentation, clearly following in the family-friendly footsteps of its contemporaries, Ants is irreverent, sardonic, and violent, even including multiple instances of swearing, something almost unheard of in mainstream American theatrical animation at the time. At this point in their history, DreamWorks was not yet sure of what exactly their brand was, and the first few entries in their filmography reflect this. While Ants seems to foreshadow the subversive, irreverent nature of Shrek, which I'll get to shortly, DreamWorks' next feature, The Prince of Egypt, is an almost complete 180. The Prince of Egypt is a grandiose musical inspired by the biblical story of Exodus, and, in addition to probably being DreamWorks' best animated feature, it follows heavily in the mold of the Disney Renaissance. But their next movie, The Road to El Dorado, which released only 2 years later, is a lighthearted and occasionally surprisingly raunchy musical adventure comedy, and its follow-up is Chicken Run, the delightfully British Aardman co-produced stop-motion parody of The Great Escape. And, in addition to a movie about a certain green swamp dweller, they would set to work on 2 other features, an ambitious film centered around wild horses in the American Old West, which would feature neither musical numbers nor talking animals, as well as a non-musical pirate adventure film based around the tales of the mythical Middle Eastern hero Sinbad. In the meantime, as the new millennium approached, Disney found themselves branching out even further from their own branding. After producing a follow-up to their classic Fantasia, they released Dinosaur, a live-action CGI hybrid non-musical adventure film. Other movies that began production around the time the Disney Renaissance was coming to a close include The Emperor's New Groove, a heavily comedy-focused story set in the Incan Empire.
Okay, is this guy... I'm getting tired of this. Is this guy just like a fanboy of animation?
Just skip ahead.
He's just listing these things.
We're never going to get to the topic.
But there's something noteworthy about Dinosaur, because Disney has done documentary-like light-hearted movies before, and they were usually pretty enjoyable. I've never heard of that one, though.
All right, well, hopefully we get to Shrek.
Let's go even further. Oh my God.
Back to Egypt.
Get back to
Fritz the Cat.
There we go.
Finally.
Fine. Bit ahead.
As DreamWorks was still testing the waters with regards to what would constitute their emerging studio brand, Shrek would go on to gross over $484 million on a $60 million budget, earning widespread praise from critics and audiences, and demonstrating significant cultural staying power. Shrek would prove to be DreamWorks Animation's most financially successful movie up until that point, and would even go on to win the first Oscar in the newly created category of Best Animated Feature at the Academy Awards the following year. But Shrek didn't just make a lot of money by making jokes and including pop culture references. It gleefully delighted in mocking the foundations of its major rival, Disney. Walt Disney Animation Studios established itself by adapting famous fairy tales from European history, treating them with reverence and portraying them in a very traditional manner.
No, it didn't. The exact thing that Disney did not was probably part of what led to Tolkien's mockery, that the dark elements from them were removed, because those were the parts for children. The dark parts were for children as morals to learn from, to teach them about the threats in the world, to not trust strangers, to not be blindly naive, and all of these things.
Well, I think
and that good behavior gets rewarded. That's what many of these old fairy tales were about. And Disney has removed a lot of the harsh elements from them.
I think of a lot of the Brothers Grimm stories, any of the fairy tale stories have all, it doesn't matter who takes them, they've all been pretty much watered down, at least the ones that we're aware of in the West. And Disney is no exception. In America, yeah. Obviously, there's European ones which they just...
You could say nowadays over on the old continent as well. Unless somebody still has a television and watches, for example, the old Czech adaptations of the Grimm's fairy tales that were they look like stage plays. They were done in the, I think, 60s, 70s mainly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're more closer to the source material, and they also went for all the lesser known fairy tales as well. If you're interested in good adaptations of these things, there's an anime series called Grimm's Masterpiece Theater, something like that, and those are pretty on point adaptations. They're also more grim.
Okay.
Heroes and heroines, usually of noble blood, are pitted against ferocious monsters, scheming villains, and vile witches, and must defeat them to restore the rightful status of their kingdoms. But Shrek turns all of this on its head, with an ugly, brutish monster cast in the role of hero, fighting against a corrupt feudal lord over a princess cursed with the form of a monster, who ends up choosing to remain in this form and shirking the norms of her society. The screenplay was loosely based off William Steig's 1990 children's novel Shrek, and was enthusiastically embraced by one of DreamWorks' heads, Jeffrey Katzenberg. Katzenberg had formerly served as the chairman of Walt Disney Studios from 1984 until 1994, only to have a bitter falling out with others at the company, including CEO Michael Eisner and founder Walt Disney's nephew Roy. And while I admit that this does involve a degree of speculation, I can't help but suspect that Katzenberg's fondness for Shrek's subversive and deconstructive nature stemmed, at least in part, from his negative personal history with Walt Disney Studios.
Definitely.
The main villain of Shrek,
open secret.
Lord Farquaad, has on more than one occasion been described as a caricature of Disney CEO Michael Eisner, while his castle Duloc, made to resemble a theme park, clearly and deliberately evokes the imagery of Disneyland. Now, while I must admit
that is, I mean, you could imply that, but that's not even consciously like, oh yeah, that looks like a theme park. It's a castle with European streets. Like, what do you want?
They have a festival.
It's really pushing. Like, this is like, they're totally making fun of Disney.
I mean, the entrance does look like you're going to a theme park. they do make a joke that like Shrek doesn't give a shit and he just goes through the entire thing.
Yeah.
But Farquaad being the caricature, that is pretty obvious. He has a lot of the facial features, not just the very obvious chin.
And he's a tyrant as well.
I'm trying to see how this has anything to do with his premise of how this is kneecapped American anime. Like, I just don't get it. It's like, it's make fun of Disney. It's like, maybe.
Farquaad is obviously like Ben Shapiro.
He has 5 minutes to make his point.
Oh God, we don't have a point yet.
No. So he took 15 minutes to set this up. Holy shit.
Yeah, I know. There must be like some obvious, clearly cut like piece of evidence that no one knew. It's like, oh wow, there it is. Shrek totally screwed up Western animation. We get it. Okay.
That includes a number of clever elements and hilarious jokes.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
I have to say that I've never really
joke.
been a fan of the film as a whole. Its heavy reliance on reference humor, combined with the highly non-aesthetically pleasing style of its characters and animation in general, just don't appeal to me personally. But the point that I've been working my way towards over the course of the last however many minutes is this: that Shrek's success had an inordinate, and in my view largely negative, effect on the broader industry simply by virtue of being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Really?
Shrek is an effective...
When
It was quite the opposite. It was at the right place at the right time because people just loved it. They kept rewatching this movie, myself included. I think I watched this movie at least 20 times when it came out. It was exactly the target demographic, and the parents loved it as well.
It's one of those movies that just
handle
doesn't
them
get old.
like they were just dumb people watching the movie. They caught up on the references as well.
Yeah. no offense, there was Mike Myers doing the some of the. Was he writing the comedy or was he ad-libbing? I don't remember
Partly only.
Yeah.
Like I think like the original role was meant to be for some American guy, but he died like a year before the thing. So only like some test footage survived with his voice. Otherwise, like Eddie Murphy was meant to be there from the beginning. So he was Donkey from the very beginning. Like they had it for him.
Right, they could have had another actor play Donkey, but Eddie Murphy was perfect, so it didn't.
He was perfect, and like Mike Myers is just so good. Like
yeah,
not the same kind of material that you would see from what was his spy movie called?
Austin Powers.
Austin Powers, yes.
Okay, well, it felt like a more mature, like the main character is intelligent, but he's seen as a brute. And that's the only way he can communicate because no one else understands him. And then he encounters someone just like him, but on the opposite side, and she has the opposite problem. So
that's his struggle, yeah.
Yeah,
he wants to get through.
It's so simple and it's so obvious, and the world makes sense. Like, yeah, this is how this would operate, and people can understand it and identify with both of the characters.
And then they made a sequel with the little same struggle of the main character.
Yeah. It's so simple. It's so good. Yeah, it's so obvious at certain times. Like, why didn't anyone do this like 20 years ago? But 3D. It worked with 3D, so why not?
Pair of trope-heavy, fairy tale-inspired stories that Walt Disney had built his media empire on. But in being so successful at such a crucial point in the history of American theatrical animation, Shrek played a major role in determining the direction of said industry for years to come. Something that we are, in many ways, still feeling the effects of today.
So wait a second. He's making the argument that Disney back in the day set the tone and the content and the genre for all animation for the next 20, 30 years, and Shrek, being as popular as it is, set the tone and the style and all the other comedy content for the next till today? Like what do you?
Shrek is the Jesus Christ of animation.
The thing is, Shrek doing everything the opposite way of what Disney did in regards to cleanliness. That is what was the fresh air that everybody loved. Because another Disney movie comes out, okay, it's gonna be some super nice, sweet thing that the kids will like for 2 weeks, and maybe you'll have to buy the thing, and then it runs every day for the next half year. But Shrek is something else, and that's and not just a little bit.
Standard, yeah.
Yeah, it's not just a little bit. Shrek is a true subversion in the honest sense of the term.
It makes Ryan Johnson envy.
Probably.
Demonstrated that animated movies could be massively successful by prioritizing crass and irreverent, unsubtle reference humor and meme-worthy moments, rather than ambitious, grandiose, more mature storytelling. And don't get me wrong, I love a good crass comedy.
He was a centurion in the Jerusalem garrisons. Really? What was his name? Nautius Maximus.
That's not mature, that's juvenile. Shrek, on the other hand, I would say had mature humor. Because it had stuff for the parents to laugh at. This is just... So, as much as I love Monty Python, this scene here is not mature humor. This is juvenile humor. You're laughing about big jokes.
You will understand this, Whisp, once you're over 18, okay? This is not for little kids.
This is for 14 to 18-year-olds.
Well, maybe in Great Britain, it could be 9-year-olds because they're a little bit more... sophisticated with language.
Yes.
I don't know.
You can start earlier there.
There you go. Fair enough.
As well as a clever deconstruction. But the problem is that when this profitable of a trend emerges, large swaths of any market will tend to swing in that direction. And this is especially true of American animation. The contrast between the pre- and post-Shrek world becomes starkly apparent when you look at the major studio movies that went into production before the movie's release, and compare them with those that began production, or had their production significantly altered, afterwards. With Disney, we went from the likes of Atlantis and Treasure Planet to Home on the Range and Chicken Little. DreamWorks quickly abandoned its period of experimentation, leaving behind The Prince of Egypt, Spirit, and Sinbad in favor of 3 Shrek sequels, 4 Madagascar movies, Shark Tale, Over the Hedge, and B-Movie. Don Bluth Studios, Fox Animation...
Yeah, but tell me about those films. Does that make them like Shrek Light or Shrek-esque? Like, what are you doing?
Madagascar is still a light-hearted comedy.
They did sequels, yeah, so did that influence new content? Was the new content like Shrek or not? That's a weird argument.
And all became financially unviable, and were quickly replaced by the likes of Blue Sky, Sony, and, worst of all, Illumination. Blue Sky's comparatively dark and mature 2002 debut Ice Age was followed by a
Don't shit on Megamind.
much more childish sequel 4 years later. And Sony spent years producing these before giving us something as good as Spider-Verse. Meanwhile, Illumination's use of cheap animation techniques, combined with their increasing willingness to pander to the lowest common denominator in their writing, has allowed them to churn out movie after movie at a fraction of what their competitors spend. This isn't to say that every animated movie that began production after Shrek has been bad, or even that every major studio film has fallen into these same categories. After all, movies like
Rango was great, it was just horrible to look at.
Bolt, Zootopia, Kung Fu Panda, and How to Train Your Dragon are all above average, and encompass a variety of styles. And I'll admit right here to finding a lot of Madagascar 2 funny in spite of the movie's numerous faults.
There is no sacrifice greater than someone else.
It was.
No! Medic!
But the problem is that this shift in the market kneecapped American animation's potential to move beyond its prior family-friendly constraints. After all, why would a studio bother to take risks when they could just make The Boss Baby and comfortably earn $500 million? While studios like Laika and Ireland's Cartoon Saloon struggle to break even at the box office for daring to challenge the prevailing orthodoxy, Illumination can pump out Despicable Me sequels and spin-offs, and rake in billions of dollars in box office earnings and merchandise revenue.
First it makes the first one, which is a super success, and then, I think we can make more of this. I think we can tell more stories and jokes with these characters, so let's try that until it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, they obviously have something that works. Why would they stop? It's not an argument to say they're going to make new stuff or everyone else is going to make the stuff that they make. It's just they have a winning formula. They should keep using it.
And Disney was pumping out straight to VHS sequels to The Little Mermaid and of these fairy tale movies, and they were all garbage. They knew they were garbage. That's why they put them straight to VHS. You don't mention those things.
Yeah.
It's just the same practice with the difference that these are successful. The Lorax wasn't successful, so there was no sequel.
Perpetuating the prevalence of these types of movies. Sure, the occasional masterpiece does manage to emerge from the mix, but for every Fantastic Mr. Fox, we get 20 Madagascar or Minions clones that individually rake in dozens of times what it earns. I completely understand that, at the end of the day, the movie industry is just that, an industry. They need to earn money to operate, and one of the easiest ways to do so is to cater to popular trends. But the problem is that, when ignoring the art portion of the art-profit balance, you rarely create anything truly spectacular.
He's an avant-garde art whore. Look, you said it yourself. First, you need to make money. With that money, you can then finance your weird avant-garde test projects. The first Despicable Me wasn't bad. That was a great movie. I prefer Megamind, and we never got a sequel to that. Why? I want my Megamind 2. Where is that?
I'm kind of concerned.
Financially successful.
I'm kind of concerned. What if this has anything to do with Shrek, though? Are these DreamWorks productions?
No, but after Shrek, like everyone just made funny 3D animated movie.
That's a really bad.
That's in part because the technology was there.
That's a really bad. There's no correlation. I don't even know where he's. Oh, because they made money, we'll make money. It's like, who said that?
Because the animation that Shrek made sure that animation for all ages is a viable option for these animated movies.
This is so stupid. This is because comedy. Therefore, we're going to start a 3D studio. It's like that's retarded. We've had drama and comedy for thousands of years, but suddenly because some guy did a slightly subtle story about a big ogre, then now we're going to have Terrible Me and all this other stuff from another studio because it did so well.
Fucking donkey.
And I think with Kubo and the Two Strings, that is an absolute masterpiece. But it wasn't marketed well either. Well, it mainly ran on... It did eventually hit German theaters too. But there was, after they had already made a DVD release, which had an Icelandic dub, but not a German one. So if you buy the German version, you have different dubs on it than if you buy the English version, which doesn't have the German dub. All these things aside, the other movies from Studio Leica did not do as great. They are also not as great. Some look a bit disgusting, and that is in part on purpose. So, will they make a Kubo 2? Probably not, because that story is done. That's not a thing you can make another story out of that will work well. They will make something else instead. Shrek is something you can make another story out of. Same with Despicable Me and some of these other things mentioned. Like, you could mention Cars, which was better written than it deserves to be. That was something that blew me away. Like, what the hell is that? And that is what makes these movies great. They are well written for parents to watch as well. Because if you write Madagascar, I found, okay, maybe there are kids who can enjoy that, but I didn't find the humor very appealing beyond that. You have to write for both levels, and then you get your successful movie. And many Disney movies don't do that.
This is just a very poor correlation argument, and there's no data to back up what he's saying aside from, well, look at how popular they are. It's like, yeah, people like making funny stories. There's nothing to do with 3D or Shrek or Disney. They just decided to make a studio. Like the guy from Disney who got fed up with Disney. I want to do my own thing, and he did it, and that worked out for a while. This could probably flop next year. No one's going to like comedy for whatever reason.
I'm not sure he made a point yet, except that, people made movies after Shrek.
Yeah, it's like Metal Gear Solid came out. It's a really well done spy action adventure story, a video game. And then Siphon Filter came out. Well, obviously they were trying to capitalize on what Konami did. It's like, no, it's a completely different game.
Metal Gear Solid only came out because Crash Bandicoot was successful.
Something like that. I don't know.
Before Crash Bandicoot could jump and spin, like a 3D Kojima adventure was impossible. But then Kojima saw it and he said,
yeah, I'm thinking of that raccoon spy game, which is for kids or is more colorful. And it's about a thief, and he goes around with a hook, and he does all. Is that inspired by Konami? I doubt it. Maybe, but you can't draw that connection. You could argue everything's influenced by everything. Every artist in every genre or every media is influenced by the same genre, but that goes without saying. But you don't just say, well, of course, because Shrek. There's no connection. Anyway.
You could argue that Shrek opened up this type of the subversive humor for the we don't take the fairy tales as seriously anymore because they've been diabetes inducing anyway. The way that Disney did them. So let's have some fun instead. That's, I think, the only thing you can accuse it of.
All right. Anyway, we got 2 minutes left.
I also understand that within the field of animation, there will always be a demand for entertainment made for children, seeing as they make up a large share of the market. It would just be nice if we could get a little more variety within the medium, because, at least for the foreseeable future, I don't see much changing in that regard. While technological innovations and options for internet distribution and monetization are making it easier for independent animators to produce and share their works, we probably won't see much boundary pushing in the realm of mainstream American theatrical animation anytime soon. And for that, we largely have one ogre to blame.
I don't see how.
How?
You have not made an argument. You just keep accusing him and talked about and mentioned 15,000 movies before him.
This is.
I think he expects us to magically understand what he means in his head.
Again,
also, he doesn't mention that, like, after Shrek, like after that era, like making a 3D animated feature has become much easier than it was. Like type of movie that they made with the first Toy Story was just like running on the computers that barely got the first versions of Maya or whatever that software was that they
Maya.
created with. So it was just all prototype software.
Yeah, like
until,
did he
yeah,
even mention like things like Ratatouille, which had nothing to do with Shrek and just was a
absolutely nothing. It's completely different technology.
or Frozen, or like all these other huge, really big names that sold. Like Frozen's probably the most world renowned in terms of box office sales and influence in the East. There's honestly, it is I don't know if you guys know, it's gigantic in the East. People love it in China, in Hong Kong, and God knows where else. So would that be more influential because they have a series now? You can
So
watch
Frozen is the Transformers of Disney.
Oh my god.
I don't know.
Not that movie. Oh god.
It's the best version, Wisp. Yeah, that's what you
God.
want to say.
Yeah, well, I
They
don't
try
know.
so hard to market Mulan to the Chinese, and then no, we want your European Barbie princess.
Yeah, this is like cherry picking. Well, Shrek was really good film and it made a lot of money. You're right. So were like 5 others that have nothing to do with Disney or musicals.
Like,
or...
There's other like movies that like Disney and DreamWorks made. Like they were using references as well, but not as much as Shrek. Like Shrek is just like a straight on parody of those things. And I'm still gonna stand by this, but that the first Shrek movie at least like did the references well, because like it was building on that. Second one was just doing it way too much. Like it was bothering me how much references it kept pushing up. Like
All the sequels are.
It doesn't really hold up as well as the first one. The
They're
pacing is just
forgettable.
so
The first one is is timeless because it's done perfectly.
It's tight and it doesn't get old as fast.
Yeah, it's not bloated with anything. It's just all the bare necessities and straightforward.
All right. Well, I
Just
think
a good ride.
that was a pretty poor video, but hopefully we'll have some stream memes to lighten up the evening, because that was kind of...
How many copies of Megamind would I have needed to buy for them to make a second one?
Oh, I don't know. 1 million?
Oh no.
Anyway, let's see what we got for memes. How to address all groups so no one gets offended. Attention, all fairy tale things. All right.
That's a good one.
Built in the 1100s. Churches built in the 1200s. Oh my god. What? Okay.
That's the goths. Pretend goths. That's the it's just emos actually.
I thought Rome conquered them. Anyway, it doesn't matter. When you're feeling down about not having a GF, but then you remember that Shrek didn't have a GF until he was 30. Okay.
Yeah.
Endgame and Shrek. I don't see how he's inevitable, but okay.
Oh yeah, inevitable.
Transphobe Jack Horner. You can't change your gender. That's great. I love it. Realist Jack Horner. Steven Universe. Yeah, okay. We've seen that dozens and dozens of times now. You're not gonna still stubbornly insist that T-Rex was just a scavenger, are you, Jack? What?
I don't know to whom this reference is.
Yeah. Strongest death simp? Weakest Jack Horner simp. Okay. I don't know what's going on here.
That's in the middle. It's Steph, and the others are female wolf characters from other franchises.
Okay. I killed a dragon. I trained a dragon. I raised a dragon. Oh yeah. I could change my gametes to procreate with the dragon. When dragon says it's her turn to be, oh. Scary stuff. Dragon trying to seduce the party, the bard. Finally, a worthy opponent. Our battle will be legendary. What?
The joke is that bards always try to seduce the enemies.
Goddamn Eisner trying to hurt this company again. Haha. Okay. Donkey watching the dragon prepare to perform the reverse cowgirl position on him. William Dafoe? Is that
What?
Yeah.
Don't think about it.
I don't know what's going on here. Has anyone ever told you that you have the most beautiful eyelashes? Whoa.
That's Zelda from Tears of the Kingdom.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she turned herself into a dragon and rammed the Master Sword into her forehead.
Oh, my God.
While losing her mind. This is completely retarded. And she flies around in the sky for 10,000 years as a sky noodle.
Sure. What we see and what dragon sees. Oh, yeah. Me tries to print black and white document. Printer, low on magenta. Me, why do we need magenta to print black and white document? Printer, good question. Remember Littlefoot? This is him now.
Oh.
He's petrol?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, whatever. My time management skills playing Majora's Mask. My time management skills in real life. Okay, yes, I get the reference.
That's for who? But I better not ask his Family Guy.
Mr. Simpson, this is the most blatant case of fraudulent advertising since my suit against the film, The Never-Ending Story. Okay. So, okay, we get it. Teaching the parrots to say the N-word. Ooh.
You don't need to. You just need to let them fly away. When they come back, they know it.
Don't judge others by their appearance. Also Shrek movies. What the hell? Yeah. Send in the Far Squad.
Oh, no.
I don't know what is going on. Farquad for Queen and Country. Okay. Oh, comma. I love these spoilers. Ha ha ha. Lord Farquaad dies in Infinity War. What? I totally lost that joke. Shrek, I'm recognizing the bodies in water. Okay. Me trying to remember the name of the donkey from Shrek. Yes, thank you. What the hell is this? Friendly reminder that Fiona chose a literal ogre over a short guy. Well, that's because she was an ogre herself, so it's kind of racist, actually.
It's not because she was an ogre. She found the beauty within Shrek. And it's actually pretty realistic.
We all know a girl who thinks everyone is jealous of her, but she looks like Shrek. Stop sending me this shit. Oh my god. What the hell? What is happening? Never forget Chris Chan was part of the Shrek Retold collaboration. Whoa. Didn't know that. Didn't know that was a thing. This is Puss in Boots Bitch, The Last Wish. We clown in this MF beta. Take your sensitive ass back to Avatar. Okay. What's that? It's hideous. Well, that's not very nice. It's just a donkey. Shrek is the god of self-confidence. Okay.
Yeah, and confidence impresses girls.
He huffed and he puffed and he signed an eviction notice. Goldilocks 17, Kitty Soft Paws 108, Puss in Boots, DreamWorks 349, Death, Puss in Boots 1.5K. What is this measuring?
This is from image boards about porn.
Oh, never mind. Puss in Boots, The Last Wish 100, you're Jewish. What? Why? How?
How? I don't get it either.
I don't know. Oh, merry men. What? What is
Where's there an E?
N-E? Yeah, I was like, what?
Oh. I'm tired.
I don't know. It's Feed me if you dare. What? Healed bite marks on dinosaurs such as Triceratops or Edmontosaurus that only T-Rex could make. Whoa, Jack Horner. This is worthless. Yeah, that went.
I suppose this is an archaeologist.
I hope so, because that
for dinosaurs
way over
who claims that they were not, that T-Rexes were not predators or something.
Maybe.
That's what I would conclude from the meme.
Yeah, that was a bit over me, but yeah, I don't know. This video is pretty silly, honestly.
There was a long video that said nothing. It made a claim but did not say anything. It assumes that we magically understand what he means.
Yeah, and he did a good history lesson of animation in the West for the past 60 years or so. But did that have anything to do with what he was getting at? I don't think so.
No, and yes, the history part was interesting by itself, but pointless.
Yeah, and
for his claim,
the silly JoJo music at the end, like I'm gonna get excited. Like, no, you're just confusing me even more. Why are you throwing in animation or music from anime in there? What is happening? Yeah, no, that was a confusing, weird take of non sequiturs and like, jeez, this guy has to take a stats course or one lesson in logic and be like, oh yeah, I should probably stop making stupid associations.
The for the history part, the Shinju Field music from Okami, that was on a low level. That was okay.
Yeah, I caught that.
It was surprisingly non-interruptive.
Right, but the ending with JoJo is like, okay, now you're doing something weird I don't get. So anyway, thanks guys we had another video we were supposed to do today, but I think we're doing it tomorrow because Gingaman couldn't make it again. So
yeah, we switched it around. He can't Friday.
The G-Man.
Yeah, so the one we're supposed to have today is coming tomorrow, so stay tuned. I think everyone wants to cover that, so Gingaman wanted to be in for that as well. That happened last week too, but that's fine.
I just watched this horrible new season with the gang, and God, it's bad.
It's they do some good things, and then they do some really stupid things. I'm just like, oh.
It's just bad.
I still have hopes, but it's very.
Why?
There's some clever things like that's.
We're not even in the same universe anymore.
Oh, obviously,
the animation is bad. The dialogue is atrocious.
They did some good things. I won't list them, but we'll talk about it tomorrow. And they did some really stupid things, but I could see the attempts at creativity and the attempts at trying to stick to the formula, and then the actual blatant attempts at just forgetting those ideas.
The formula of making the main character a side character who's completely incompetent and useless all the way to the end, despite having found his power. That formula.
That's not the formula. The formula.
That is the formula.
Was taking the lore and going, how can we use this in a creative way while still giving it some nuance that we can use ourselves. So
and making it a decision between demons and communists.
Oh, is that what you got out of it?
It plays during the communist revolution. It actively mentions the Paris Commune as the good guys.
All right.
The demons are against the revolution, so it's either before the commune or before the demons. No.
Yeah, the entire church, the entire story and history of the church is just forget about it. Just don't even use logic, reference. Just forget.
It's not even in the right year. The Haitian massacre hasn't even happened yet.
Oh yeah, that's right. I noticed that too. It's like, what does that have anything to do with this this weird.
We killed all the white people in Haiti because they were vampires.
Oh, by the way, here's a person. Here's a person from this revolution, which has nothing to do with us. It's like, hi, like what? What is going on? Anyway.
Also, hi, I'm Quetzalcoatl. I was still a human when Cortez came around.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Anyway, we are going to talk about that tomorrow. It's one of my favorite things to talk about regards to animation and video games. So we'll have a good time. Have a great evening. We'll see you soon. Good night.